The fourth is government's objective not objection, sorry, objective, which is to achieve redistribution of income. About the redistribution of income is this. First, you need to know certain terminologies. Number one, poverty. ठीक है? What is poverty? Poverty is basically people not able to afford the basic necessities of life. Food, clothing, housing, basic education, healthcare, sanitation, cleanliness and stuff. If you can't afford these basic things for you and your family, that is poverty, गरीबी जिसको उर्दू में हम बोलते हैं. फिर एक तो पॉवर्टी को फिर हम डिवाइड करते हैं दो सेगमेंट्स में. पॉवर्टी एक होती है एब्सोल्यूट पॉवर्टी और एक होती है रिलेटिव पॉवर्टी. एब्सोल्यूट पॉवर्टी का मतलब है कि आप इतनी कम इनकम ही नहीं कमा रहे हो कि आप बेसिक चीज़ें अफोर्ड कर सको. और रिलेटिव पॉवर्टी इज कि किसी और की कंपैरिजन तुम लेस अफोर्डेबिलिटी रखते हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अ poor person in US versus a poor person in Pakistan. Relatively, a person poorer in Pakistan will be in much more worse conditions than a person who is poor in the US. ये जब हम comparison करते हैं between people और उनकी गरीबी, तो वो relative poverty होती है. जब हम उनको एब्सोल्यूट टर्म्स में देखते हैं कि ये बंदा तो ये अफोर्ड ही नहीं कर सकता, बेसिक नेसेसिटीज ज़िंदगी की ही कांट बाय, तो वो तो बिल्कुल ही हम बोलेंगे एब्सोल्यूट पॉवर्टी के अंदर है. और फिर हम बात करते हैं इनइक्वालिटी की. इनइक्वालिटी इज़ अमीर और गरीब के अंदर गैप, कितना बड़ा गैप है. सो ऑब्वियसली दिस विल बी डिस्कस्ड अ लिटिल मोर इन डिटेल. सो लेट मी राइट सर्टेन टर्मिनोलॉजीज दैट वी वांट टू discuss with first in this chapter. Poverty yani garibi. Usually poverty is assessed by persons income usually. So a person whose income falls below a minimum level necessary to meet basic needs is considered under poverty. So I'll write someone is considered poor if their income falls below the minimum level necessary to meet basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, education, healthcare, sanitation, एक्सेट्रा। बेसिक भी नहीं मिल रही उसको। दिस मिनिमम इज कॉल्ड the poverty line. A lot of country, a lot of people are below the poverty line, and over the years, because of economic growth in developing countries, people have been coming above this poverty line. Our Prime Minister Imran Khan talks a lot about China and how they raised so many people out of the poverty, above the poverty line, uh, because they are now able to afford certain goods and services. So usko definitely, that's a positive thing and we want that to happen. So एक तरफ तो ये बात हो गई। फिर पॉवर्टी के अंदर मैंने कहा देयर आर टू टाइप्स ऑफ पॉवर्टी। वन इज एब्सोल्यूट poverty and the other is relative poverty. This is discussed usually in chapter number 5, which has to do with living standards, where we will reintroduce these terminologies. So जहाँ तक absolute poverty की बात है, it's about people not receiving enough to meet even their basic needs. People who earn below $1.25 a day. अब तो I think this has gone up to $2 a day. Okay, $2 से कम if you are earning in a day, then you can't afford even the basics. और फिर relative poverty is about that people with fewer goods and services than others ये कंपैरिजन हो गया तो ये रिलेटिव पॉवर्टी के रेल में चला जाता है। Another term we should clarify is inequality. Inequality है क्या? Basically, usually we say inequality is when there is a difference between the rich, the difference between the rich and poor in terms of, say, malnutrition, level of infant mortality. Infant mortality is that when a kid is born, how many years they're able to live before they die. It's about starvation. It's about ill health. It's about life expectancy. And this is what redistribution of income helps to reduce, because inequality is in terms of these things. You can even talk about in terms of more like things about like the healthcare facility people might have, or the foods that they might have, you know, facilities they might have वगैरह. तो 2007 के अंदर स्टडी पब्लिश हुई थी in the US, which was showing that there is a very high uh, rising inequality in the United States of America, in which they said that almost 10% of the top earners in the US, 10% लोग जो हैं US के, वो ऑलमोस्ट आधी इनकम जो यूएसए कमाती है वो सिर्फ 10% लोगों के बीच में जाती है, और जो बाकी थोड़ी सी हाफ वेजेस रह गई हैं वो 90% लोगों के बीच में डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होती है. तो दैट शोज़ कि कितनी ज़्यादा इनइक्वालिटी है. अमीर ज़्यादा कमा सकता है और गरीब कम कमाता है. ऑब्वियसली फिर ये सारी इनइक्वालिटीज़ होती हैं. एंड द लास्ट थिंग टू दिस इज़ हाउ द गवर्नमेंट कैन एक्चुअली सॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम of redistribution. So we'll say government's policy to improve redistribution of income. So how can government improve redistribution of income? Well, number one, government targeted spending. People, especially those poor ones, the have-nots, we can have the government spend towards them. Okay, the government can tax the rich. Okay, government spends the tax collected from the rich on poor people in rural areas, development, public education, and even healthcare for that matter. So those people who can't afford the best education, government will help them through it. Who don't have work, government can create infrastructure development projects in which those people can work, and obviously they're going to get money through it. फिर subsidies, even government can help through subsidies. Subsidies क्या होती है? When government pays a sum of money to consumers and producers. Usually we've learned that it is given to the producers to lower the price. So the reason why I'm saying it to the consumers also, because कई जगहों पर governments can sell essential goods एट पब्लिक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन शॉप्स, जैसे पाकिस्तान में यूटिलिटी स्टोर्स हैं, जहाँ पे पीपल हु हैव राशन कार्ड्स कैन गो एंड बाय बिलो कॉस्ट के ऊपर असेंशियल गुड्स। तो ये एक किस्म की सब्सिडी हो गई टू द कंज्यूमर्स। ओके, so we'll write government pays a sum of money to consumers and producers. Government can introduce ration cards to the poor who can go to public distribution shops to buy goods below cost. तो एक तरीका तो ये हो गया। दूसरी तरफ गवर्नमेंट कैन गिव सब्सिडीज टू प्रोड्यूसर्स, subsidies to producers to sell at lower cost. This benefits both the consumers and the producers because the good is being sold at lower cost. And lastly, the number third way through which you can distribute income better is through taxation. We will study a little more detail in about taxes, but the main idea is that the government can tax the rich and spend on the poor, and that can definitely reduce or improve the distribution of income. There might be some discussions on this taxation. If you're doing it too much on the rich, the rich might get discouraged to expand their factories and stuff, and that might adversely affect the economy and eventually the people who are getting hired. So that's for later discussion.